This is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein with episode 24 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. That's me. Yes, indeed. And folks, I figured I might as well go ahead and get another podcast out of the way because, as you probably have known from the last podcast, I will be making a family vacation this summer. I'm going to be meeting up my parents at our special hangout. Well, I call it a special hangout. It's really just kind of a location that we like to go to on a year-to-year basis. Unfortunately, the last few years, I was not able to attend because of my obligations with work, but my mom, my dad, my supervisor have all said, man, you got to take some vacation time. And that's the thing with me, like when it comes to work. I always feel like Cal Ripken Jr. in a way, because, you know, Cal Ripken Jr., Hall of Fame baseball player, he played in 2,632 consecutive games, if memory serves me correctly, before he decided to take a day off. So I figured I might as well just go ahead, keep working at everything. But after a while, you kind of start to realize that, vacation, you might have to, start taking some vacations. And this is an opportunity I had to take one vacation as we are just about nearing the end of summertime and getting ready to go back to another athletic season at Lamar University. So, therefore, I am taking a vacation. Now, where I'm going, there's not really a lot of Wi-Fi around or internet. I mean, I could go into the next town over to do all that internet stuff, but it's going to be really hard for me to, do another podcast next week. So, I probably won't have one out next week. But when I do get back, I will be trying to come out with another podcast or another podcast episode by then. So just in case you don't hear from me over the next week or so, don't worry. I'm going out of town for this week, and then I will be back in a couple of weeks, and we will continue with what we always like to do, which was talk about sports and talk about things that have, kind of bothered me. And speaking of things that have kind of bothered me, I'm sure we all know what happened at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Well, not quite the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, but more specifically the Home Run Derby. And the Home Run Derby this year, as is the All-Star Game, was held in Arlington, Texas, home of the Texas Hangers, which was a really great traditional event. Listen, you're going to have to get used to me saying that, okay? Until I get a rematch where the Rangers lose, that's going to be the case, okay? Okay. Now, back to my point. The All-Star Game and the Home Run Derby were in Arlington, and apparently the national anthem for the Home Run Derby was sung by Ingrid Andress. Now, this is the first time I actually heard of her, but apparently she's a Grammy-nominated country music star, and she was asked to perform the national anthem, and it is arguably one of the worst, if not the worst, national anthems of all time. Now, I can't say that I've seen it because, in all honesty, I think I probably would have been creeped out by how exactly she performed it as well, because a lot of people were very surprised and shocked by this performance, saying, oh, it's the worst national anthem ever, it's worse than Roseanne, or worse than Carl Lewis for all that matter. And I'm just like, I can't listen to it. It's like, I didn't even bother listening to the tape, so because in my mind, I know it's bad. Like, I don't even need to hear it to know that it's bad. Well, as it turns out, Ingrid Andress actually apologized on Tuesday, the very next day, saying that she was under the influence and that she was drunk. She said, I'm checking myself into a facility today to get the help I need. That was not me last night. I apologize to MLB, all the fans, and this country I love so much for that rendition. And it's kind of, it is kind of surprising that this has actually gotten to that point. Like, this is how bad the entire All-Star Game was in general. How in the world do you not have, an All-Star? Like, how in the world are you supposed to be running this event, and yet you have somebody that you should have checked to say, hey, this person's not feeling well, this person's under the influence. Why in the world did you let this person go out there and make a you-know-what out of themselves? And this person was not in the right mind to be singing the national anthem, even if she had one drink or two drinks for that matter. But yet, she said that she was drunk. And it's it's so comical about how the entire All-Star game was. Not only with the terrible uniforms that look like they were trying to go with a tropical paradise theme, which, let's be real, there's nothing tropical paradise about Arlington, okay? But my goodness gracious, I mean that whole thing was just a disaster. But I do I do commend Andress for admitting to her mistake and admitting that she had a drinking problem and she was going to go get some help at the rehab facility. And that takes a lot of courage to admit that. This, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Joe Namath when, he was under the influence and he was drunk and he was being interviewed by oh gosh, there was a female reporter. I forget her name, but a very prominent female sideline reporter. Not Erin Andrews, but Susie Colbert. That's who I'm thinking of. Yes. So he was actually drunk on a sideline during the game with the Jets game when he was being interviewed, and he was being interviewed by Susie Colbert, and he obviously said some things which I'm not gonna reply or repeat just because I think it's a little bit. It might be perceived as disrespectful to the circumstances, or disrespectful to every woman that might feel a bit uncomfortable, even if the intention was not to make it uncomfortable, just for some of the things that he said. But he was completely under the influence, and he recognized that the very next day. He called Susie Colbert and said, "Look, I was not myself. I apologize, and it was definitely a lowest point of his life, and he knew right away he needed to get some help, and so he went and got help, and things have been going great for him ever since then. But I do hope that Ingrid Andress can get some help and continue with her country music star career and hopefully overcome this, because it's definitely going to be something that she's going to have to deal with for a long time. But hopefully, I will say this, the next time she performs the national anthem, you just hope that she does it in a way that is much better, and it would be a perfect redeeming arc, because I think everybody deserves some redemption, even if you can't capitalize on the opportunity that you are given. So that was some big news that I saw from Ingrid Andress, or from the All-Star game as well. Another thing that caught my attention was a situation that happened to former NFL running back Terrell Davis, and this is really something that has been kind of bothersome to me, because Terrell Davis, who is a Hall of Fame running back, who played for the Denver Broncos, won 2 Super Bowls, is also an MVP in the first Super Bowl victory. He was on a flight to John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California, along with his family. They were going to go to Disneyland, when supposedly one of his kids was looking for ice in a drink. Like, his son had asked for a cup of ice, and the passing flight attendant supposedly did not respond to it. So then Terrell gets up and politely taps on the flight attendant's arm. And that's when the flight attendant, now I don't know whether it's a male or a female, but some reports have said it was a she. This article I'm reading is he. We don't know. But this flight attendant said, "Don't hit me." And the flight attendant took off, and Terrell Davis was very shocked and surprised by what was happening, or in that particular moment. Like, he was kind of stunned, but there was really no further incident on the plane. And the passengers who were right there said, "Hey, don't worry about it. You didn't do anything wrong." And so the flight continues on without incident. It lands in Orange County, but then everybody is told on the plane to stay right in their seats. So you're thinking in that situation, hey, maybe somebody had a medical emergency up in front. They're bringing the paramedics on. Or, there's probably an issue maybe with another unruly passenger right in front of the plane. Well, they bring the cops, and they actually arrested Terrell Davis. They arrested him right in front of his 2 sons and his wife, who was probably seated ahead in a plane, and they brought him out of the airport. All supposedly, the flight attendant probably, reported this to the captain, saying, "Hey, this passenger was being, disrespectful to me and everything, and this and that, and so, we got to make this report." So I guess the pilots doing their job, what the attendant told them, just called in and said, hey, we had this passenger that was, being a little disrespectful. We need some officials, cops on there. And so the policemen, the federal agents that came on board the plane, and they were doing their job. They were being told just to go find a passenger. I'm sure they didn't think it was going to be Terrell Davis. And obviously, Terrell Davis was arrested, but he wasn't taken to jail. I guess they pulled him off for questioning. And they questioned him. He explained everything that happened. They talked to other witnesses. And it turns out that this was, in fact, a false allegation. So nothing more happened. But Terrell Davis, as of right now, is suing United Airlines, the plane that he was on board at that time. And he seems to think that race played a role. And to be quite honest with y'all, I do agree with Terrell Davis. I think there was a little bit more involved than just a simple overreaction here. Now, look, I don't know the flight attendant. I still don't know whether it was a male or a female. I mean, we will probably not know. There's going to be reports about that. But I feel like Terrell Davis was being respectful. He was trying to get the flight attendant's attention to give his son at least a cup of ice. The flight attendant probably didn't hear him, so then Terrell Davis politely taps on the shoulder. And that, I guess, set the flight attendant off, or the stewardess off, in a very negative way, thinking, oh, this guy's, trying to disrespect me and everything. And so, and I can understand why they would think that way, but I also understand why Terrell Davis thinks that way, because he says in an interview, he said that, I believe if I were not a black man, I wouldn't have been in handcuffs until they found out exactly what happened. And I can honestly say that that was the case, because all the agents did down there was they put him in handcuffs, they took him off, and then they questioned him until they released him. But what they should have done was, at that particular moment, I mean, now that I think about it, I don't know what else they could have done, the agents, but I do think, though, that this was a case of false accusations, as it has been proven to be. Now, United Airlines has since apologized, and they had took that flight attendant off duty while they're currently investigating the incident. They basically said in a statement, this is clearly not the kind of travel experience we strive to provide, and we have reached out to Mr. Davis's team to apologize. And this is really sad, because Terrell Davis, now I don't know him personally, but I've seen all the interviews and seen him talking about his NFL career and everything that he went through. I like to think he is one of the nicest guys out there. And I'm sure if anybody lives in Denver or is a Broncos fan that knew Terrell Davis and everything, or know of him, or just, what he's like as a person, I'm pretty sure they will tell you he's one of the nicest individuals out there. So, kind of a weird situation there, especially for a guy that once upon a time ran for 2,000 yards in a single season, won 2 Super Bowls, and is in the NFL Hall of Fame, despite having one of the shortest careers in the NFL. I mean, the guy, if he had not been injured for most of his career, he would have probably been more considered as one of the greatest of all time. So it's really sad, to have that, a guy with his reputation take a direct hit over some false allegation. And this is where I struggle with. This is where I cringe. People that make false allegations need to serve some time in prison. We have people that are making false allegations about people that commit violence or, sexual assaults and everything. They seem to get away with it. Whereas the person that was framed for this, their reputation takes a hit. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be investigating every sexual assault case or domestic case or any other case like this matter, because they do deserve to be investigated. But what happens if it turns out that this is not true? What was the person trying to do? Destroy this person's reputation? Or were they just trying to hopefully get some money out of it and then try to sue them and everything? What were you trying to do? Okay, you're a flight attendant. Now, listen, if somebody were to grab you by the arm physically, you would then say, hey, don't do that. But if someone taps you on the shoulder, even if it wasn't for intention, then I'd turn around and I'd say, yes, sir, how can I help you? Or, yes, ma'am, how can I help you? And, they give you the suggestion and you do your job. It's really simple. I just think this flight attendant had might have been going through a lot of stress over a flight, might have had some other issues going on, or maybe had this false assumption. They probably didn't know who Terrell Davis is. And I mean, I wouldn't say I blame them if they didn't know or they probably didn't care, but the fact of the matter is this should not have happened. This is embarrassing, and I do feel bad for Terrell Davis that his reputation has kind of taken a bit of a hit. Now, we know that he wasn't at fault here. We understand that they did everything right. They cleared him and all that, but this is an embarrassing moment. And people like this have to take accountability. People that make these accusations or employ companies that hire people that make these allegations, they have to take responsibility. So it's really unfair. And the fact that this is a public figure that we're talking about here, when this stuff could probably happen on any other flight or any other situation, this is a real tragedy in my mind. Now, again, nothing major came out of this. Terrell Davis ended up being released after a false allegation, simple, overreaction, what have you. And hopefully he and his family were able to enjoy themselves at Disneyland. But I know it's kind of hard to put something like this in the past, and it is real sad, and it is real upsetting. But I do feel for Terrell Davis. So with that, I apologize, to Terrell Davis, even though I wasn't involved, I wasn't on that flight. I apologize that this did happen for you, and hopefully you and your family can find some peace out of this. Because again, no one should remember you for this incident. They should remember you for playing a Super Bowl game while battling a migraine headache and winning at Super Bowl MVP honors. So, yeah, that's the way I look at it, I feel. There were a couple of passings that kind of had a huge impact or in society, one more so maybe than the other, but Jacoby Jones, who was a former NFL wide receiver / kick returner who played with the Houston Texans, was one of the fan favorites, and then would go on to win a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens, passed away unexpectedly at the age of 40. And it was real sad to hear that, because obviously, we thought, you'd think a guy like him was going to live a full life. And this crazy part is he was actually hired to be the next head coach, not of a collegiate football team, but certainly one of the lower level teams right here in Beaumont, actually, with the Beaumont Renegades. So it was really surprising, because I think, the Beaumont Renegades, were looking to have a new head coach. The Beaumont Renegades, by the way, are the indoor football team, and they had actually hired him as a head coach and offensive coordinator. So right as he was getting ready to start his first season, he passes away unexpectedly in his sleep, and it's real sad. Like, when I saw that, I was a little bit taken aback, and because I remember when he was with the Texans, he would always be a guy that would make kickoff returns for touchdowns and everything, and he would always be a nice weapon for Matt Schaub to have. He wasn't the number one receiver on the Texans. That was usually for Andre Johnson. I want to say he was like the number 3 guy with Andre Johnson, Kevin Walter, and then him. Those are the only few receivers that I can think of in the days of the Texans. But that was in 2011 when he was part of that team that won their first playoff game and then would unfortunately lose in the divisional round to the Baltimore Ravens in 2011. But then the following year, he ends up going to Baltimore, and he turns out to be a huge weapon for them, especially making 2 of the biggest plays in that postseason run. The first was when he caught that miraculous pass from Joe Flacco on a 3rd and 15 situation when the Ravens were out of timeouts, and Joe Flacco dropped back, and he was able to fire a pass which somehow was poorly covered or poorly defended by the Denver defense, and Jacoby Jones just went behind him and caught it real easily, and then just ran it in for a touchdown that tied the game and would later be won by Baltimore in double overtime. So that was a huge play for the Ravens. And then, of course, in the Super Bowl a couple weeks later, Jacoby Jones returned a 108-yard kickoff return to start the second half. That put the Ravens up 28-6. He also caught a touchdown pass in that game. And you could argue in Super Bowl 47, which was won by the Ravens over the San Francisco 49ers, you could actually argue that Jacoby Jones might have been the most valuable player of that game. Just trying to see if I could pull up some of his stats here. Well, he had one 56-yard touchdown return or touchdown pass that in the game, so I don't know if that would really help. But he also had that 108-yard kickoff return and finished with 288 all-purpose yards, which was a Super Bowl record, or still is a Super Bowl record, and probably would have gotten him the MVP had Joe Flacco not gone off in that game. And of course, the 49ers almost came back to win, but the Ravens ended up winning 34-31. And another thing that I had forgotten about Jacoby Jones, he was actually a contestant on Dancing with the Stars, and he did pretty well. He actually made it all the way to the finals, but finished in third place. So, yeah, go figure. A lot of these athletes decided to join the Dancing with the Stars competition, and he did pretty good, I'll tell you that much. But I was really sad to hear that Jacoby Jones had, passed away. And I sometimes think that one of the biggest mistakes that the Texans made was letting him go. They did so on May 1st of 2012, and then a week later he re-signs with the Baltimore Ravens, and he sort of got the last laugh. And it's really sad because a guy like him, he should be considered a Texans legend. In fact, I was thinking about a former high school classmate of mine, Carter Burgess, who I still follow on Instagram to this day, a guy that was on my baseball team in high school, and was a really good hitter, a player there. But he loved Jacoby Jones. He loved him with all the kickoff returns and wearing his jersey every single day. It seemed like with every Texan content that he would always post, Jacoby Jones would be that guy. And I was thinking about him when Jacoby Jones passed, and sure enough, he had some special tributes to Jacoby Jones. So it was really, really emotional to hear that, or for Jacoby Jones, to finding out that he had passed away. So I'd say rest in peace to Jacoby Jones. He also passed away on the same day as Shannon Doherty, and the former Beverly Hills 90210 actress who sadly passed away after a long battle with breast cancer. And it's just kind of unfortunate that she was one of the most iconic actresses, or one of the most iconic TV actresses, whether you were a fan of Beverly Hills 90210 or whether you were or just a fan of Charmed or whatever else she was on. And if you were a fan of hers, you had to be feeling really sad. So it was a really kind of an emotional day for Shannon, or for a couple of passings, which is really sad. And Richard Simmons also passed away. Now, that's another real tragedy. Just seeing, an exercise enthusiast, pass away at the age of 76, and it was real sad. And another thing that happened that kind of bothered me is the fact that Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, was shot in Pennsylvania. Now, I typically try to stay away from politics, but I just couldn't help just feel a little bit of sense of anger. Now, I'm not a huge Trump supporter. I'll be perfectly honest. I just, I feel like with the way our country's going right now, we're in a situation where we have somebody that has kind of divided the country in a polarizing effort. People on the conservative sides like him, and Republicans like him, Democrats don't, and everything. We have this guy, and then we have somebody that's currently in the office right now that's really not mentally fit to be president of the United States. And there are people calling for him to resign or step down because there doesn't seem to be a chance that he has an opportunity to win the election, or this upcoming election. And I typically try to stay away from that just because of the whole anger and disgust that I feel just with how we have come, where we are at as a country on both sides. So I typically don't consider myself conservative or a liberal. I try to be more Malcolm in the middle. No offense to Frankie Muniz. I always joke about that there are three types of people in this world. There's Libby the liberal, Connor the conservative, and Malcolm in the middle. So I'm sort of the in the Frankie Muniz school of thought, if you will. But when I heard that Donald Trump got shot, I was aghast. Like, there had been assassination attempts on famous politicians before. We know of the ones of Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, William McKinley, and James Garfield. Just to, or actually not William McKinley. I can't remember if it was either William McKinley or Benjamin Harrison. No, actually, it was probably William McKinley because I know that Harrison was only in office for like 30 days and he contracted pneumonia or something that made him sick, and then unfortunately he passed away in that moment. But or about a month or so after he took office. But yeah, so when I saw that, I was just like, or when Trump got shot, I mean, there was a feeling of anger. Like, I know there's a lot of people that don't like him. I think every president will have people that don't like them. But why would you go to the full extreme of trying to hit this guy? Are you serious? Like, if you don't like him, don't listen to him. If you don't agree with his viewpoints, don't support him. Support your guy. But why go to the full lengths to try to take him down? And it's just sad that we were reminded of this, and it doesn't, I mean, luckily he missed for some reason. He might have grazed Trump, and it's just so frustrating. And I struggle talking about politics just because, there's a lot of people that have to politicize everything, and it's like, we don't need to go that far. Like, we can talk about it in town halls or, have these debates and everything, but it's almost like we don't need it to control most of our lives. And I felt like the shooter in this case that did was using politics as a way to control, his life. And it just makes you sad that he went to the full lengths to try to assassinate a former president, if you will. But it didn't work because now, you're going to have more people that are going to be supporting Trump, and you're going to have more people that are going to be hating him. So, I cringe every time I think about this. I try not to talk about politics because it's really not my strong suit. So that was another thing that just really, really made me upset and just, angry that we have gone to this swing. If President Biden had been the one that had gotten shot, I would have felt the same way for sure, because we don't need this to happen. Like, we have experienced tragedies before, and it's just really sad that there are people in this world that would go to full extreme lengths without having a conscious mind to try to make themselves known, try to make themselves heard. And yet that's a poor representation for the people that support. And that's clearly the worst thing possible. Like, if this had happened to Obama or to Biden, or, it might have happened to, I don't remember, but if it's happened to the previous presidents, the whole world would have been up in flames, all because of one idiot that decided to take matters into his own hands. And I'm talking about people on both sides of the political spectrum. So I typically try to stay out of politics, and I'm going to do that for most part. But when I heard that, I was just taken aback. So that's another thing that sort of bothered me. Another thing that was really of interesting note here was, the NBA Summer League is going on right now, and the Houston Rockets seem to have gotten the right player for them. Reed Shepherd, who, as we all know, was taken in the third pick overall in the draft behind the Atlanta Hawks and the Washington Wizards. So I heard this comment, or I actually read an article that I thought was really interesting, that when the Atlanta Hawks were, looking into draft players and draft prospects, they saw Reed Shepherd, and apparently, according to an NBA analyst, Matt Norlander, who works for CBS Sports, the Atlanta Hawks were looking at Reed Shepherd, and this is crazy. They believed that Reed Shepherd was a Patrick Mahomes-like prospect in the draft. And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, wait just a minute. Patrick Mahomes, Reed Shepard. Okay, like Reed Shepard so far has really been electric. And look, it's the summer league. It's exhibition games. These games don't really matter, but they only matter for players trying to make a name for themselves, trying to get on a team in the NBA, or at least trying to make their franchises club. We're going to see Reed Shepard be an impactful player, but Patrick Mahomes, you're comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. Um, so this is what the Atlanta Hawks had said, according to Matt Norlander. He said the Atlanta Hawks viewed Reed Shepard as a Mahomes type of player on their board. They actually had them number 2 on their board, and ultimately they went with a guy that had better size. It will be interesting to see what kind of career Reed Shepard has and where he goes, because he was the player that finished second in this race to the Hawks to Rizicher. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right, but we might well see down the road that it could be, a potential mistake. So it's really interesting that he would go to that extreme. And I thought it was just so crazy that you're comparing a young rookie basketball player that supposedly, is coming out of college and is now drafted in the NBA playing summer league games. You're comparing him to the best quarterback in the NFL right now. And I think this is typically. See, I'm struggling to question, why you would compare somebody like Reed Shepard to somebody like Patrick Mahomes. Is it because of the athleticism, which we know Mahomes has a little bit more of? Is it because of the IQ, which there's an argument to be case? Why is it that Reed Shepard is, why is it that Reed Shepard is being compared to Patrick Mahomes? And why are you thinking to yourselves, we might have made a mistake when you drafted the player that you ended up drafting because you needed bigger size? Why in the world are you starting to lament this? But it's so, it's just kind of crazy that I think the Atlanta Hawks might be concerned that they might have made a mistake in drafting Reed Shepard. But it's almost like, look, I don't think Reed Shepard was the guy that you were looking for, because you already have a great guard in Trae Young. Why would you need somebody in Reed Shepard unless you were drafting him to be a backup player? Which, again, for a team that has the number 1 pick, you just can't really. I think it's crazy that you're comparing Reed Shepard, who has yet to play an official NBA game, to Patrick Mahomes. And look, Mahomes is in a league of his own. So far, through at least 2 or 3 games, Reed Shepard is averaging like 20 points per game and everything, and he's probably done with the summer leagues. But I just think that it's kind of crazy how people are looking at him as Patrick Mahomes, or at least another player. But look at his college career. Look at Reed Shepard's college career. During his freshman campaign, he was a guy that scored 12.5 points in 33 games on 53.6% shooting from the field. And was 52.1 behind the three-point line. But I think you're talking about a freshman here. Like, don't get me wrong. You're talking about a freshman that could potentially be a great player. Now, I don't think he'll be one of the greatest of all time. I think he's a guy that's going to need to learn to develop into that role for the Rockets, because he's going to be playing behind Fred VanVleet, and by the time VanVleet leaves, Shepard will be able to take over. But I just think it's kind of crazy how you're comparing him to Patrick Mahomes already when he has yet to play an NBA game, or you see him as a prospect. Like, how in the world is that possible, for that matter? But I don't know. So far from the games I've seen of Reed Shepard, I think he looks great. But again, he's playing on a summer league team. Guys that are trying to make the roster, guys trying to make an impact on the clubs they're currently playing for right now. And, we'll wait and see what he does in the NBA. I think he'll have a very good career. Hopefully he's a final piece for a Rockets team that is looking to get themselves back to the top and pick up another championship or two. But it's gonna be at least a couple of years. I got the Rockets winning in this decade, so I got about 6 more years left, or 5 more years left, I should say. I don't know if 2030 would count as part of the 20s, even if it was the 29-30 season. So, but yeah, Reed Sheppard clearly is having a good start so far, and he has been compared. Well, a more favorable comparison for him would be Mark Price. Now, if you don't know who Mark Price was an NBA player who played for the Cleveland Cavaliers during the late 80s to the mid 90s. And the Cavaliers had some very good teams. They were a team that could have gone to the NBA Finals if they hadn't ran through the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan. But Mark Price was definitely one of the best three-point shooters out there. He was a career 40.2% shooter from three. He led the NBA in free throw percentage 3 times, and yeah, he has definitely been he had a tremendous career, and I'm surprised that he hasn't been in the Hall of Fame, Mark Price. I think he deserves to be in the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame. So, but Mark Price actually had some interesting notes to talk about, Reed Sheppard, because he apparently had saw that, Reed Sheppard was being compared to him in the game, and Mark Price had tweeted out, he said, "I just watched some highlights of Reed Sheppard at NBA Summer League. He sure reminds me of a former NBA All-Star. This young man has a bright future." And I think I knew who he was talking about. He was referring to himself as the former NBA All-Star, and it was really interesting. So then I decided to quote tweet Mark Price. I said, "Says someone who should be in a Hall of Fame. Mark Price approves of Reed Sheppard." Very complimentary, very respectful, because I had followed Mark Price's career. In fact, Brent Price, Mark Price's younger brother, was drafted by the Rockets, and so I knew of Mark Price through his younger brother, Brent Price, for that matter. And so, but I quote tweeted Mark Price and didn't really think anything was going to come out of it. Well, I ended up getting 1 like on my tweet, and guess who that like came from? Mark Price. Mark Price, the Cavaliers legend, actually liked my tweet. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so cool, man. I mean, I've gotten likes from big name personalities before, but Mark Price, oh man, that's just so amazing. And I never really would have imagined a guy like him. Like, this guy, I really think he should be in a Hall of Fame. I know I've said that before, but I think Mark Price is a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame. But I thought it was really cool. So, Mark Price, thanks for the like on the tweet, man. Definitely enjoyed watching you play and watch your brother play. And hopefully Reed Sheppard does live up to the expectations of you and to everyone else who see himself through you, for that matter. So, and so definitely a lot of things going on at this moment. So, folks, I know this is a little bit of a different episode, because usually I would divide them up into segments. So I didn't really have much, so I figured I'd just combine everything all into this one segment. And, I kind of need to mention one more thing. A couple of more things, for that matter. So, Major League Baseball draft, we had a pitcher at Lamar University, Brooks Capel, get drafted by the Chicago Cubs in the 9th round. So, congratulations to him on that. And then yesterday, sad news, Joe Jellybean Bryant, the father of Kobe Bryant, passed away. A guy that I know played with the Rockets and certainly was, a former player in the NBA who played with the Rockets and 76ers and was the father of Kobe Bryant, and definitely will be missed. And it's nice to know that a father and son have reunited up in heaven, if you believe in that. And it was a really sad to kind of hear that. I sometimes think that I sometimes think Joe died of a broken heart, just because he lost his son, and it was a real tragedy. And I think that's what the case was. And we'll never really know, but I'm glad that they are now reunited in heaven as well. And one more thing before I go, I do want to think back to my time at East Texas Baptist University. unfortunately, a former athlete that I had covered during their passed away unexpectedly, Amanda Wilson, who was a women's basketball player for the team and was a pretty good one. She had been married and she had had some kids, and I don't know how old. She was like pretty young, but she passed away unexpectedly this week. And I do want to extend my thoughts and condolences to her husband Austin and their family, as well as to Amanda's family as well. It was definitely an honor covering her games while I was at ETBU as a broadcaster and also as a SID. And yeah, it's just really sad. And Mark, my co-host Mark, texted me about it, and I was just stunned just to hear that. It just doesn't make sense how someone with so much ahead of them can be taken too soon. And I sometimes don't understand what God does, or why he plans for certain people to get called home at certain points much earlier than anticipated. But I don't know. I mean, that's just some questions, and I don't know if I'll ever get an answer to, and I'm sure we'll never get an answer to the questions that we want to have. But God's got a plan. I sometimes wish I knew what it was. Maybe I should get an almanac or so that way I could see into my future. Not only that, but also the future of my sports teams, as well as future endeavors for everybody else in society. So that's just kind of the way I look at it. So now, again, this is definitely a bit of a different podcast. I just wanted to get my thoughts on a few things out of the way. I'm going to be continuing to pack up here, getting ready for my road trip, leaving tomorrow. But again, folks, you can subscribe to my podcast, Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock, on Spotify, Buzzsprout, or not Buzzsprout, Podbean. Buzzsprout, you can listen to my other podcast on Two Pals on the Pod. And speaking of which, I'm actually going to get an episode going with my man Mark T. Robinson on that podcast. So we'll have that out for you sometime later this week. We're going to be talking a little bit of NBA, just some stuff that's going on around. And we may have a special guest from Mark's side of the family. So we'll have to wait and see there. But we will be having an episode of that coming out this soon. As far as this podcast is concerned, you can listen to it on Podbean, Spotify, and I will also be uploading it to my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91. So that is going to wrap it up here for today. Again, I may not be able to get a podcast out next week, but if I do, then hopefully we'll be able to talk about some things as well. But I do plan on getting it out the following week, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, folks, I hope you guys have yourselves a great day, and I will see you guys next time on Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. Have yourselves a good one.